Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Senator, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So, some really good questions on this. I want to spend my 5 minutes with trying to break this down for the American people. Because being the emergency management director during COVID in Florida, I saw how the lack of manufacturing in this country, the reliance on China, was a major detriment in a pandemic. I can't imagine, God forbid, we got into a war in the near future. The surprise that the American people would have of the things that we, A, don't make here anymore, or B, rely on other folks to supply us, supplies that could be cut off. How do we educate the American people? Like, I gotta be honest, when I started learning about antimony, I was like, is that adamantium and Wolverine? Like, I had no idea what it was. And then I realized, oh, this is a real problem. China has us, and they know it. And you know, so what I want to spend some time with you guys is, how do we tell the American people, like, this is kind of wrapped up in the tariff issue with China. China is controlling exports, threatening to control exports, and our U.S. military literally relies on this stuff for some of the most critical weapons that we make. And so China has such a huge advantage. And I want to talk about the stockpile, because that was another lesson we learned during COVID, right? We went to the cupboard and the cupboards were bare, right? That was what we heard. But it was true. It was true. The National Strategic Stockpile was empty. Now, they put $2 billion to build a stockpile, but that's not going to be enough. So I kind of want to open it up. How do we educate the American people on the national security risk and why this is so important? Senator, I'll give you the first bite of that.
Well, thank you so much. And you know, I would just take off of that. If history, knowing our history, if you want to read one book that tells you how we became the superpower of the world, how we won World War II, how we were able to be the armament of the world, we supplied the arms that were needed around the world, we outproduced everybody. Read Freedom's Forge. If you want to read one book that tells you exactly who we became and how we became who we are today, that would put everything in perspective what we need to do now, because we're way behind the curve. And you went in eloquently and went into that. If we don't get back to producing, you know, well, you can go back to NAFTA and blame NAFTA. You can blame the USMC. You can blame anything you want. You can blame 1990s allowing China in the WTO. Everything that we allowed to happen, thinking that we could open up after the wall fell. You know.
No, and that's exactly right. Like, we could go back and
we've been lulled to sleep. That's all.
We could figure out how we got here.
Yeah.
But how do we? The American people have a lot going on. There's a lot of incoming, a lot of distractions. Yeah. In the rare earth space, especially in antimony, which I want to focus on, how do we cut through to the American people to make them understand what a dangerous situation, quite frankly, we find ourselves in this rare earth space? I supported when the president wanted to sign a deal with Ukraine on rare earth minerals. Most Americans were probably thinking to themselves, why are we even talking? Why is that part of the equation, right? And so we're going to have to. We're never going to manufacture this stuff here, you know, with all the environmental rules, or even if we try, it's going to be such a small amount. We're going to have to depend on allies to do that. And even if we can find the rare earth, we don't have the experience to manufacture it. I mean, the Chinese, it's literally a closely guarded secret. They got specific people with the specific techniques that's been passed down through generations of people, and they are not letting those people leave to go other places to show you how you refine this stuff. How do we explain this to the American people?
Yeah, I think it's really a political question, because I think you're asking, Congressman, is how do you get the American people to buy in so that they are able to, because it's going to cost more eventually to do things in a way that, as we discussed, does not offend human rights.
But that's exactly right. I mean, like, look, the White House, I've seen them working on this, but they got to work on the communications piece of this, to look the American people in the face and say, you want to know why the cost of military weapons are going up? Here is why we have to spend more money. You want to know why we're doing these tariffs with China? Here is why. Mr. Fernandez, I want to give you a chance before I run out of time.
Look, I think we need a little bit of humility. It took us a long time to dig this hole, and we are in a hole. I think you take some examples. 2 years ago, the PRC imposed restrictions on germanium. I'd never heard of germanium, but it turns out germanium is needed for semiconductors. At that point, we had a problem. We literally spoke to 100 countries and said, do you have any extra germanium you can sell to the world? We actually found some to the MSP, 25% of the world's supply we were able to add. It was just hanging around a country that we'd never heard of. And so I think you've got to go example by example and do the same thing we did during COVID, which is, we have a problem that we didn't have active ingredients in that supply chain, as you know. But you've got to take a couple of examples and say, we've got a problem. And it took us a while to get here. It'll take us a while to dig out of this hole.
The gentleman's time's up. Great question, great answers. I wish we just had more time.